The crash on the Forbidden World. Captain Ethan Hayes never expected to die on a forbidden planet. He had survived pirate attacks, asteroid fields, and even a failed mission in enemy space. But now his starship was on fire, spinning out of control. The alarms inside the cockpit screamed in his ears as red warning lights flashed across the control panel. He tried everything: stabilizing thrusters, emergency landing systems, but nothing worked. The ship had taken too much damage from the ion storm. He had only one option left. "Come on, hold together," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls. The planet below grew larger, its surface covered in thick green forests and jagged mountains. This was Zephyr 7, a world surrounded by mystery. It was forbidden to all travelers, human or alien. No one knew why. Those who entered never returned. The ship hit the atmosphere, flames bursting around it as it fell like a dying comet. Ethan clenched his jaw and braced for impact. The crash was violent. Metal tore apart. The ground shook. Trees shattered as the ship plowed through the dense jungle, leaving a trail of destruction. Then silence. Ethan groaned as he unbuckled his seatbelt. His head pounded, and his right arm burned from a deep cut. The cockpit was filled with smoke, sparks flying from broken wires. He coughed, forcing himself to move. The ship was destroyed. His communication system was dead. And worst of all, his emergency beacon wouldn't work on this planet. He was stranded. Ethan grabbed his survival pack and kicked open the emergency hatch. Outside, the air was thick and humid. The sky above was a strange shade of violet, with two suns setting in the distance. Massive trees stretched high into the sky, their roots twisting like giant snakes. Strange glowing insects floated in the air. The jungle was alive, too alive. Then he felt it. Something was watching him. Ethan's soldier instincts kicked in. He slowly reached for his blaster. The feeling wasn't normal. It was deep, like a presence pressing against his mind. He scanned the area, but saw nothing. The jungle was silent. Too silent. He moved carefully, stepping over fallen branches and wreckage. His priority was finding shelter before nightfall. He had no idea what creatures lived here, but on a forbidden planet, they couldn't be friendly. As he walked, he spotted something unusual, a stone structure covered in vines. It wasn't natural. It was old. Ancient symbols were carved into its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Someone lived here before," Ethan murmured. Then he heard it. A whisper. It wasn't from his mind. It was real. A voice, soft and distant, like the wind was carrying words from far away. He turned sharply, aiming his blaster at the shadows. A figure stepped forward. She was alien, but unlike any he had seen before. Tall and elegant, her silver skin shimmered under the twin suns. Her deep violet eyes glowed softly, filled with both curiosity and fear. Her long, dark hair flowed like silk, and she wore a form-fitting outfit made of strange, flexible material. She was beautiful, but there was something powerful about her presence. Ethan didn't lower his weapon. "Who are you?" he demanded. The alien woman didn't answer. Instead, she raised a hand, as if warning him to stay back. Her gaze flickered to the sky, then to the jungle around them. Ethan followed her eyes. The air felt heavier, pressing against his skin. Then the jungle moved. The trees rustled without wind. Shadows twisted unnaturally. The whispering grew louder. The alien woman took a step closer, speaking in a soft but urgent tone. "You should not be here, human." Ethan's grip tightened on his blaster. "I didn't exactly plan this." "You must leave," she insisted. "Now." He scoffed. "In case you didn't notice, my ship is in pieces. I'm not going anywhere." The alien woman clenched her jaw. She looked over her shoulder, as if something was coming. Her fear was real. Ethan took a slow breath. What is this place? Why is it forbidden? She hesitated, Then she looked straight into his eyes and whispered a chilling truth. Because this planet is alive, and it does not want us here. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. Before he could respond, a low growl echoed through the jungle. The ground vibrated. Something massive was moving beneath the earth. The alien woman grabbed his wrist. Run. Ethan didn't argue. They sprinted into the jungle as the shadows behind them came alive. The whispers turned into a deafening roar. He had survived many things, but this. He had no idea how he was going to survive this. The planet's deadly secret. Ethan ran, his breath sharp in his chest, his boots slamming against the uneven jungle floor. The alien woman, whoever she was, moved effortlessly, her silver skin glowing faintly under the strange violet sky. She barely made a sound as she weaved through the thick undergrowth. Behind them, the jungle was changing. The trees moved as if shifting on their own. Vines twisted unnaturally, stretching out like grasping fingers. The air was alive with whispers, soft at first, then rising to an eerie chorus. The sound crawled into Ethan's mind, making his thoughts feel sluggish, like something ancient was trying to push its way inside. Keep moving, the alien woman urged, glancing over her shoulder. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. Whatever was behind them wasn't just dangerous. It was something unnatural. The ground rumbled, shaking the trees. Ethan nearly tripped as the earth cracked beneath his feet. A deep guttural growl echoed through the jungle, vibrating in his bones. He stole a quick glance back, and his stomach dropped. Something was rising from the ground. It wasn't a creature. Not exactly. It was the jungle itself. Thick roots pulled free from the soil, writhing like massive serpents. The trees bent unnaturally, their bark splitting open to reveal pulsing blue veins of energy. The jungle was more than alive. It was aware. Ethan's grip tightened on his blaster, but the alien woman grabbed his wrist. Don't, she hissed. Weapons will only make it worse. Worse? Ethan snapped. What even is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she dragged him toward a large rock formation covered in vines. With a swift motion, she pressed her palm against the stone. The vines unraveled, revealing a narrow entrance. In here, she said. Ethan hesitated. He didn't trust her, but the roaring jungle behind him wasn't exactly giving him much of a choice. Gritting his teeth, he followed her inside. The tunnel was dark, the air thick and heavy. Small glowing symbols lined the walls, casting a dim blue light. Ethan slowed his breathing, trying to stay alert. After a few minutes, they reached a vast underground chamber. Strange metal structures jutted from the rock, covered in the same glowing symbols. At the center of the room stood a massive stone monolith, covered in carvings that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Okay, start talking. What is this place? The alien woman turned to him, her violet eyes serious. This is the reason Zephyr 7 is forbidden, she said. This planet is not just a world. It is a prison. Ethan frowned. Prison for what? She stepped closer to the monolith and placed her hand against it. The carvings glowed brighter. The air thrummed with energy. For something that should have never existed. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. That's vague. She turned to face him. The Zephyr, the people of my world, once ruled the stars. But our power came from something ancient, something beyond our understanding. This planet was the heart of that power. We built our empire using the energy from this place. She took a deep breath. But then, the planet began to change. It was no longer a source of power. It became a living thing. It started taking from us. Our people vanished. Our ships were torn apart. The planet's hunger grew stronger. So we sealed it away. We erased its existence from history and declared it forbidden. Ethan crossed his arms. And yet here you are. Her expression darkened. Because my people lied. They didn't just seal the planet. She gestured to the monolith. They left something behind, something dangerous. And if it wakes up, she hesitated. The entire galaxy could burn. Ethan stared at her. He had been through a lot in his life. But this was different. If she was telling the truth, he wasn't just stranded on a dangerous world. He was standing on a ticking time bomb. A sudden tremor shook the chamber. The symbols on the monolith pulsed wildly, as if responding to their presence. The alien woman's eyes widened. No, it's waking up. Ethan backed up. You want to explain what that means? Before she could answer, a deep, inhuman voice echoed through the chamber. You are unworthy. The air became heavy, pressing against Ethan's chest like a physical force. The whispers from the jungle returned, but now they were inside his head. Images flashed through his mind. War, fire, planets reduced to ash. He gasped, gripping his temples. The alien woman staggered, her breath ragged. It knows we're here. We have to leave. Now. Ethan didn't argue. They turned and sprinted back through the tunnel. But as they neared the exit, the entrance collapsed, blocking their way out. Trapped. Ethan cursed under his breath. Tell me you have another way out. The alien woman looked around, searching. There's a second exit, but a shadow moved behind them. Ethan froze. The air crackled. From the darkness, something emerged. A figure, tall, cloaked in shifting shadows, its face hidden. But its eyes, glowing, piercing, inhuman, locked onto them. The whispers grew louder. The time has come. Ethan raised his blaster. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't human, and it wasn't friendly. Hunted by the Zephyr, Ethan's heart pounded as he gripped his blaster. The shadowy figure stood motionless, its glowing eyes locked onto him and the alien woman. The whispers in his head grew louder, almost unbearable. He gritted his teeth and fought to stay focused. The time has come. The voice wasn't just inside his head anymore. It echoed through the chamber. The very air trembled with its presence. Ethan felt his legs grow heavy, his breath shallow. The energy in this place was pressing down on him, trying to crush him. The alien woman, Lyria, as she had finally introduced herself, was frozen too, but her hands trembled slightly, as if she was fighting some invisible force. Ethan didn't wait for the figure to make the first move. He lifted his blaster and fired. The shot passed straight through the shadowy figure. The energy bolt hit the cavern wall behind it, scorching the ancient stone. But the figure remained untouched. Lyria grabbed Ethan's arm. You can't fight it. We have to move. She pulled him toward the far side of the chamber, where another tunnel opened into darkness. The monolith behind them pulsed violently, sending shockwaves through the air. The ground shook beneath their feet. Ethan didn't argue. He turned and sprinted after her, his boots slamming against the uneven floor. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, and a gust of freezing air rushed past him, chilling his skin even through his flight suit. Then, the figure moved. It didn't run. It didn't walk. It flowed like living smoke, surging after them. The cavern walls trembled as the darkness expanded, reaching for them like ghostly hands. Lyria skidded to a stop at the edge of a ledge. Below them was a sheer drop into blackness. Ethan glanced back. The figure was closing in fast. The tunnel walls warped as its presence spread, like reality itself was unraveling. Lyria made a decision in an instant. Jump. Ethan barely had time to react before she grabbed his hand and dragged him over the edge. The fall was longer than he expected. They plunged through darkness, the air rushing past them. Then, suddenly, water. Ethan hit the freezing water with a hard splash, the shock stealing his breath. He kicked his legs, fighting to surface. When he broke through, he gasped for air and looked around. They had landed in an underground lake, the water glowing faintly with some unknown bioluminescence. Jagged rock formations jutted from the surface like black teeth. The cavern ceiling loomed high above, barely visible. Lyria surfaced beside him, coughing. She pushed her wet hair back and glanced up. The tunnel they had jumped from was far above, but the shadowy figure was gone. For now, Ethan swam to the edge of the lake, pulling himself onto a rocky outcrop. Lyria followed, breathing heavily. Ethan sat up and exhaled. "Okay," he said, shaking water from his hair. That was terrifying. Lyria shot him a sharp look. "You have no idea what we're dealing with." Then start explaining. She hesitated, then looked at the glowing water. That thing. It wasn't a creature. It was a remnant of this planet's past. A fragment of the weapon's consciousness. Ethan frowned. "You mean the planet is haunted?" Lyria sighed. "Not haunted, but the energy here remembers. It holds echoes of what happened before. That was a piece of something much, much worse." Ethan rubbed his face. "Great, so we're running from ghosts now." Before Lyria could answer, a distant roar echoed through the cavern. It wasn't the whispering voice from before. This was different. Louder. Closer. Lyria's face paled. "No, they found us." Ethan didn't need to ask who they were. He already knew. The Zephyr. Lyria's people. The ones who had exiled her. The ones who wanted the weapon's power for themselves. Ethan grabbed his blaster and pushed himself to his feet. "How many?" Lyria closed her eyes, as if listening. When she opened them, they were filled with fear. Too many. Ethan cursed under his breath. He had fought enemies before. Pirates, mercenaries, rogue warlords. But nothing like this. The Zephyr weren't just another alien race. They were advanced, ruthless, and desperate. "Come on," Lyria said, leading him toward a narrow tunnel on the far side of the cavern. "We need to keep moving." They ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, the walls glowing faintly with ancient symbols. Ethan could feel the weight of the planet pressing down on them, like the very air was trying to trap them here. Then suddenly, light ahead. They emerged into a vast open space. Ethan skidded to a stop, eyes widening. They stood in the middle of an ancient city. Massive stone buildings, covered in vines, stretched high into the cavern ceiling. Strange, floating crystals pulsed with faint blue light, casting eerie shadows. The city was silent, too silent. Lyria whispered, "This is the heart of Zephyr 7. Ethan turned to her. "You've been here before." She shook her head. "Only in stories. My ancestors built this place, and then they abandoned it when the planet started changing." Ethan exhaled. "So what now? Do we find a nice abandoned hotel and wait to die?" Lyria ignored him, stepping forward. She touched one of the floating crystals, and suddenly, the city came to life. A deep hum echoed through the air. Symbols on the buildings lit up. The ground trembled beneath them. Then, footsteps. Ethan turned, blaster raised. A group of Zephyr warriors emerged from the shadows, their armor gleaming, their weapons drawn. Their leader, a tall figure with glowing blue eyes, stepped forward and locked his gaze onto Lyria. "So," he said, his voice cold, "the traitor returns." Lyria stiffened but didn't look away. "This planet will never belong to you." The warrior smirked. "Oh, but it already does." Ethan tightened his grip on his blaster. They were trapped. And the Zephyr weren't here to talk. The heart of the forbidden world. Ethan stood frozen, his blaster aimed at the Zephyr warriors. The tension in the air was thick, crackling with unspoken threats. He had faced death many times before, but this was different. These warriors weren't just another enemy. They were hunters, and he and Lyria were the prey. The leader of the Zephyr warriors stepped forward. He was tall, his silver skin gleaming under the eerie blue light of the ancient city. His eyes glowed a deep, unnatural blue, like twin burning stars. The air around him seemed to vibrate with raw energy. His armor, covered in intricate symbols, pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of the ancient city around them. Lyria stiffened beside Ethan. Her fingers twitched slightly, But she didn't reach for a weapon. She knew this man. "Commander Vale," she said, her voice steady but edged with tension. Vale smirked, tilting his head. "Ah, so you do remember me, traitor." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, you two have history." Vale chuckled. "Oh, the kind that ends in betrayal and exile." His gaze flickered to Ethan. "And who is this?" "Another foolish human who stumbled into something he doesn't understand." Ethan tightened his grip on his blaster. "I understand plenty. Like the fact that you're outnumbering us 10-2. Makes me think you're afraid." Val's smile disappeared. The air grew colder, as if the city itself responded to his mood. Lyria took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here, Vale." "The planet. The planet belongs to us," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "Our ancestors built this place. It is our birthright." Lyria shook her head. "No, they abandoned it for a reason. You know what lies beneath the city. You know the truth." Val's expression darkened. "I know the power that sleeps here. Power we will claim." Ethan glanced at Lyria. "What exactly are we talking about?" Lyria hesitated. Then she turned to Ethan, her violet eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. "Fear. This city," she said, "was built around the core of the planet's energy. The Zephyr used it to create weapons, to conquer worlds. But they never controlled it. They only borrowed its strength." Ethan frowned. "Borrowed from what?" Lyria hesitated. Vale answered for her. "From the ancient force that slumbers beneath our feet." Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't like where this was going. Lyria exhaled. "The energy that runs through this planet isn't just a resource. It's a living force. A sentient being, imprisoned long ago. The Zephyr tried to use its power. They failed. And now, it waits." Vale smirked. "Not for much longer." Before Ethan could process what that meant, Vale raised his hand. The symbols on his armor flared with energy, and the entire city responded. The ground trembled. Buildings that had been dead for centuries awoke, glowing with ancient power. The floating crystals pulsed faster, their light flashing like a heartbeat. Then the ground split open. A massive crack tore through the center of the city, revealing a deep chasm beneath. From within, a strange golden light began to rise, spiraling upward like mist. Ethan took a step back. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Lyria's face was pale. "He's waking it up." Vale spread his arms, his eyes glowing even brighter. "The time has come. The Zephyr will reclaim their destiny." Ethan muttered a curse. "Yeah, I've seen this movie before. It never ends well." Before he could react, the air exploded. A shockwave blasted through the city, knocking Ethan off his feet. He hit the ground hard, pain jolting through his ribs. The sound was deafening. A deep, reverberating roar that didn't belong to anything human. Ethan lifted his head, his ears ringing, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Something was rising from the chasm. A massive, shimmering form, made of pure golden energy, began to take shape. Its body twisted and shifted, never fully solid, yet undeniably alive. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned with an intensity that made Ethan's skin crawl. And then it spoke. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" The voice was everywhere, inside his mind, inside his bones. It was ancient, powerful, and angry. Vale didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his expression one of triumph. "I am Vale of the Zephyr. We have come to restore our empire." The golden beam turned its burning gaze onto him. The air crackled with energy. "Foolish child, the Zephyr did not build this city. They were its prisoners." Val's smirk faltered. The golden being raised a single massive hand. The floating crystals shattered instantly, sending shards raining down. The buildings groaned, ancient stone cracking under invisible pressure. Lyria grabbed Ethan's wrist. "We have to move. Now." Ethan didn't argue. He pushed himself up and ran after her. Behind them, the golden entity unleashed its power. Lightning-like energy coursed through the air, striking the Zephyr warriors. They screamed as their armor overloaded, their bodies convulsing. Some simply vanished, their forms dissolving into dust. Vale staggered, his glowing blue eyes filled with shock. No, this isn't how it's supposed to. The golden being swiped a hand toward him. A wave of energy blasted forward. Vale barely had time to raise a defense before it hit him full force. He was lifted off his feet and hurled across the city, slamming into a crumbling tower. Ethan didn't stop running. He could feel the raw power at his back, the heat searing the air. Lyria led him toward a dark passageway at the far edge of the city. There's another way out. They dove into the tunnel just as another massive explosion shook the ground. The walls trembled. Dust rained down from above. The energy was spreading, consuming everything. Ethan glanced back one last time. The golden being had fully emerged now, towering over the ruined city. It lifted its head toward the sky and roared. The sound shook the entire planet. Lyria grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him deeper into the tunnel. This is only the beginning. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, he muttered. I figured. And behind them, the world began to collapse. Love awakens the weapon. Ethan's breath was ragged as he sprinted through the dark tunnel, his footsteps echoing against the ancient stone walls. The ground beneath him shook violently, each tremor stronger than the last. Behind them, the golden entity continued to awaken, its power pulsing through the planet like a heartbeat. This tunnel better lead somewhere, he shouted over the deafening rumble. Lyria, running ahead of him, didn't answer. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the dim light, her long dark hair flowing behind her. She moved with urgency, her every step driven by fear and purpose. Ethan could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just about escaping. This was about stopping something terrible before it was too late. The tunnel twisted and turned before opening into another vast cavern. Ethan skidded to a stop, eyes widening. In the center of the cavern stood a massive floating crystal, suspended in midair. It pulsed with a soft blue glow, its energy humming through the air. Surrounding it were towering pillars covered in ancient sci-fi symbols. Some were broken, their stone cracked and worn by time. Lyria took a deep breath. This is the heart of the planet. Ethan frowned. Didn't we just leave the heart of the planet? Lyria shook her head. No, that was just the prison. This is where its true power resides. Ethan didn't like the way she said that. He glanced at the floating crystal. And let me guess, this thing controls the giant murder god we just left behind. Lyria's jaw tightened. Not controls. Contains. Ethan sighed. Of course. Suddenly, the cavern trembled again. Ethan stumbled, barely managing to stay on his feet. A deep, inhuman growl echoed through the chamber. Lyria's eyes widened. It's already spreading its influence. If we don't act now, it will consume the entire planet, and everything beyond it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we stop something that can erase people from existence with a thought? Lyria hesitated. Then her gaze shifted toward the floating crystal. This core, it's alive, she whispered. It reacts to strong emotions. The Zephyr used to channel their will through it to access the planet's energy. But they only knew how to take from it, not how to speak to it. Ethan crossed his arms. So what, you're gonna have a conversation with the doomsday device? Lyria stepped forward. Something like that. She reached out and placed both hands on the crystal. The blue glow flared, sending waves of energy through the chamber. The pillars trembled. The cavern walls hummed, as if the entire planet was listening. Ethan took a step back. This seems like a bad idea. Lyria closed her eyes. Then the world changed. The cavern disappeared. Ethan blinked and found himself standing in a vast, empty space, Stars stretched endlessly in every direction. The air was thick with energy, humming with an unseen force. Lyria stood beside him, but her form was flickering, shifting between solid and translucent. Then a voice, deep, ancient, and powerful, spoke. "You are not Zephyr." Ethan turned sharply. A massive, glowing figure loomed before them, its golden light dimmer than before. But its presence was overwhelming, like standing before a god. Lyria took a deep breath. "No, but I am their descendant, and I am here to fix what they broke." The golden entity studied her. The Zephyr took what was never theirs. They feared what they did not understand. "And now you come to beg for mercy." Lyria shook her head. "No, I came to end this." The entity's form pulsed, shifting. The stars around them flickered. "You cannot end what you do not understand." Lyria hesitated. Then she turned to Ethan. Her violet eyes were filled with determination. Ethan frowned. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lyria stepped closer. "Because I know what I have to do." Before Ethan could react, she grabbed his hands and pressed them against the crystal. The energy exploded around them. Pain surged through Ethan's body, not the kind that burned, but something deeper. He felt his thoughts being pulled apart, scattered through time and space. For a moment, he saw things, memories that weren't his, visions of wars fought long before humans even existed, entire civilizations rising and falling like waves in an endless ocean. And through it all, he felt her. Lyria. Her presence was wrapped around him, pulling him back from the brink of something vast and unknowable. She was holding on to him, grounding him. Ethan clenched his jaw and focused. If this planet responded to emotions, then he wasn't going to give it fear. He was going to give it something stronger. Lyria's grip tightened around his hands, and for the first time, Ethan saw it, the connection between them. It wasn't just trust. It wasn't just survival. It was something deeper, something neither of them had dared to acknowledge. Something the planet could feel. The golden entity hesitated. For the first time, its voice softened. "You, love." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't have an answer to that. Lyria, however, did. "Yes," she whispered. "And that's why you don't have to fight anymore." The entity's form flickered. The golden glow dimmed. Then the energy around them shattered, and they were back in the cavern. The crystal's light pulsed once, then faded. The tremors stopped. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Did we just win? Lyria turned to him, her expression unreadable. We stopped it, but it left something behind. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Lyria raised her hand. A faint golden glow pulsed beneath her skin. Ethan's stomach dropped. The energy didn't disappear. It had just chosen a new vessel. And that vessel was Lyria. Ethan exhaled. I have a bad feeling about this. Lyria gave him a small, tired smile. Yeah, me too. Behind them, the cavern trembled once more. The fight wasn't over yet. The final battle. Ethan stared at Lyria's glowing hand, his mind racing. The golden energy, the same power that had nearly destroyed the Zephyr, was now inside her. It pulsed beneath her silver skin like a living force, shifting and swirling with each breath she took. This is bad, he muttered. Lyria clenched her fist, watching the faint glow flicker. It's different now, she said softly. It's not trying to consume me. Ethan shook his head. That's what it wants you to think. We just fought a literal god, and now you're carrying a piece of it inside you. That's not exactly comforting. Before Lyria could respond, a deep rumble shook the cavern. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the ground trembled beneath them. Ethan's instincts screamed danger. Something's coming, he said, turning toward the tunnel behind them. And then they heard the footsteps. Loud, heavy, marching in perfect unison. The Zephyr were coming. Lyria tensed. They're not giving up. Ethan cursed under his breath. Of course not. Your old buddy Vale isn't the type to accept defeat. He wants that power. And if he finds out it's inside you. Lyria's expression hardened. Then he'll try to take it. The glowing crystal in the center of the cavern dimmed further, its energy drained. The planet had fallen silent, as if waiting to see what happened next. Ethan checked his blaster. Half charge. Not enough for a full fight, but enough to cause trouble. Then, from the darkness, Vale emerged. He was limping, his once pristine armor cracked and scorched from his earlier encounter with the golden entity. His face was twisted in fury, his glowing blue eyes locked onto Lyria. Behind him, a squad of Zephyr warriors stood in formation, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Ethan tightened his grip on his blaster. So, I'm guessing you're not here to congratulate us on saving the galaxy. Vale didn't smile. He raised his hand, and his warriors took aim. You don't understand what you've done, Vale said, his voice cold. That power belongs to the Zephyr. You had no right to interfere. Lyria stepped forward. It doesn't belong to anyone, Vale. That's why our ancestors sealed it away. Val's expression darkened. And that is why they were weak. He pointed at her. You carry its essence now. That makes you a threat. Ethan's heart pounded. Okay, hold on. How about we don't shoot the one person who just stopped the planet from eating us all? Vale ignored him. You don't even realize what you've become, do you? His eyes flickered toward Lyria's hand. That power is not a gift, Lyria. It is a curse. It will change you. Lyria hesitated. Ethan could see it, the uncertainty in her eyes. But then she straightened. No, it's only a curse if I let it be one. Vale exhaled slowly. Then he raised his weapon. Then I have no choice, he said. I will take it from you by force. The Zephyr warriors fired. Ethan lunged at Lyria, knocking her out of the way as the energy blast struck the ground. The cavern exploded in light, sending rock shards flying. The heat burned against Ethan's skin as he hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop. Lyria pushed herself up, her eyes flashing. The golden energy within her flared to life. Ethan barely had time to react before a shockwave erupted from her body, sending the Zephyr warriors flying backward. Vale barely held his ground, his armor's energy shields flickering. There it is, he muttered. The power of the gods. Ethan scrambled to his feet. Lyria, whatever you're doing, you might want to dial it down a bit. Lyria's breathing was ragged, her entire body glowing now. The energy wasn't just inside her anymore. It was becoming her. She clutched her chest, her eyes filled with both fear and understanding. I can feel everything. The cavern around them trembled. The ancient walls, the remnants of the lost city above. She could feel it all. Vale saw his opportunity. He lunged forward, activating a hidden blade on his gauntlet. If you won't surrender it, I'll cut it out of you. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He moved on pure reflex, throwing himself between them. Val's blade slashed toward Lyria, and Ethan took the hit. Pain exploded through his side as the blade sliced into him. His vision blurred, his knees buckling. Ethan. Lyria caught him before he hit the ground. Her hands pressed against the wound, but it was bad. Too deep, too much blood. Ethan forced a weak smile. Not my best idea. Vale pulled back, his blade dripping red. His expression was unreadable. But Lyria, she wasn't afraid anymore. The golden energy erupted from her body, filling the cavern with a blinding light. The air itself cracked, reality bending around her. Ethan felt the pain vanish. His wound healed itself. He gasped, looking at Lyria in shock. Her eyes had changed. They were no longer violet. They were golden. Vale took a step back. No, this isn't possible. Lyria slowly rose to her feet, her expression calm. It is, she said softly. And I understand now. She lifted her hand, and the entire cavern shifted. The Zephyr warrior's weapons melted into dust. The floating crystal shattered, releasing a wave of energy that surged through the planet. The power of Zephyr 7 was no longer trapped. It was hers. Vale shook his head. You don't know what you've done. Lyria's golden gaze met his. I do, she whispered. And I forgive you. Vale flinched as the energy surrounded him, lifting him off the ground. His body convulsed as the golden light wrapped around him. For a moment, it looked like it would consume him. But then, it stopped. Vale collapsed, gasping for air. His eyes no longer glowed blue. Ethan stared in shock. What did you just do? Lyria exhaled. I freed him. Ethan looked at Vale. The once powerful commander was now ordinary. No power, no glowing eyes. Lyria had taken everything from him. Vale shuddered. Then, without a word, he turned and fled. Ethan let out a breath. That's it. We won. Lyria looked at her hands. The golden light was fading. The planet was settling. She smiled softly. Yes. Ethan exhaled. Then he grinned. So, does this mean we get off this rock now? Lyria laughed, and for the first time in a long time, the planet was silent. Escape and a new future. The dust settled. The echoes of the battle faded into silence. The once ancient prison, Zephyr 7, had changed forever. Ethan stood beside Lyria, his breathing uneven, his body still trying to process what had just happened. Vale was gone, his warriors had fled, and the golden energy, the force that had once threatened to consume entire civilizations, had chosen Lyria. And yet, it was fading. Ethan frowned as he watched the golden glow pulsing beneath Lyria's skin begin to dim, like a star running out of fuel. Not to ruin the moment, but what exactly is happening to you? Lyria exhaled, looking down at her hands. The energy wasn't meant to stay inside me. It was meant to be balanced. The Zephyr tried to control it. Vale tried to take it, but it was never ours to keep. She turned her gaze toward the ruins around them. The floating crystals were gone. The once violent tremors had stopped. The planet itself felt calm. Ethan looked at her warily. So, you're saying the godlike power is just leaving you? Lyria hesitated. Not exactly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Oh, great. That's comforting. She gave him a small smile. It's choosing its own path now. I didn't destroy it. I set it free. Ethan sighed. And what does that mean for you? Lyria turned to him, her violet eyes no longer golden, locking onto his. It means I'm finally free too. The escape. A distant rumble shook the air, not from the planet, but from the sky. Ethan's communicator crackled with static. A voice, rough, familiar, cut through. Hayes, if you're alive down there, you better answer before I leave your sorry ass behind. Ethan blinked in shock. Hail. He grabbed his communicator, pressing it hard against his ear. You're alive. I thought your ship got wiped out in the storm. On the other end, Captain Jace Hale let out a dry chuckle. Almost did. But unlike you, I don't crash every time I fly. I picked up your distress signal before your ship went dark. Looks like I got here just in time. Ethan let out a breath of relief. You have no idea how happy I am to hear your voice. Can you land? A pause. Then, negative. The atmosphere's still unstable, but I can hover just above the tree line. You got a way up. Ethan cursed under his breath. He had no ship, no transport. Working on it. He turned to Lyria, who had been listening quietly. Any chance this ancient planet has a fast elevator to the surface? Lyria gave him a look, then pointed to a pathway leading deeper into the ruins. There's an old Zephyr launch pad. If we can reach it, we might be able to trigger the transport system. Ethan clapped his hands. See? That's why I keep you around. Let's move. They ran. The path led them through narrow corridors, past towering stone walls covered in fading symbols. The deeper they went, the lighter the air felt. Ethan could tell the planet was no longer fighting them. For the first time, it was letting them leave. They reached the launch pad. It was ancient, covered in dust and vines, but the controls were still intact. Lyria pressed her hand against the panel, and the entire platform hummed to life. A circular disc rose from the ground, crackling with Zephyr energy. A transport beam, a vertical stream of light, shot up into the sky, piercing through the thick clouds above. Ethan whistled. "That'll do." Lyria turned to him. "Are you ready?" Ethan glanced at the sky, where he could faintly see Hale's ship circling above. He took a deep breath, then looked back at her. "Let's get the hell off this planet." They stepped onto the platform, and the beam of energy shot them upward, carrying them through the sky in a rush of light. As they ascended, Ethan looked down one last time. The city below was no longer a place of war and death. It was quiet, at peace. And then, they were gone. A new beginning. The transport beam deposited them inside Hale's ship, where Ethan stumbled forward, blinking at the bright interior lights. Hale, a grizzled, rugged-looking pilot with a permanent smirk, leaned against the control panel, arms crossed. "You look like hell." Ethan gave him a tired grin. "Nice to see you too, buddy." Hale's eyes flicked to Lyria, then back to Ethan. "So, you picked up a +1. Lyria raised an eyebrow. "Is that a problem?" Hale chuckled. "Not for me. But the rest of the galaxy might have something to say about it." Ethan sighed. "Yeah, about that. We should probably not tell anyone about what happened here." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean how you almost unleashed an ancient planetary god on the universe? Yeah, I'm sure no one's gonna ask questions about that." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Just get us out of here." Hale smirked and flicked a few switches. The ship roared to life, engines flaring as they pulled away from the planet's surface. As they broke through the atmosphere, Ethan turned to Lyria. "So, what now?" Lyria looked out the window, watching as Zephyr 7 became a distant shadow behind them. "I don't know," she admitted, "for the first time in my life. I don't have to run. I don't have to fight. I'm free." Ethan studied her for a moment, then gave her a small smile. "Yeah, me too." Lyria turned to him, her eyes searching his. "And you? Where do you go now?" Ethan shrugged. "I was never good at plans." He paused. "But maybe this time, I'll let you decide." Lyria's lips curved into a soft smile. "Then let's go somewhere new. Somewhere no one knows our names." Ethan grinned. "I like the sound of that." Hale groaned. "Oh great, so now I'm flying 2 fugitives across the galaxy. This is gonna be fun." Ethan patted him on the shoulder. "Relax, Hale. Think of it as a new adventure." Hale rolled his eyes. "You always say that." The ship soared into the vast expanse of space, disappearing among the stars. Zephyr 7 was behind them. And ahead of them, a future they could finally choose.